EU boss, John Setka, insists that he's not going to step down. There have been lots of calls for his resignation, including from the ACTU boss, Sally McManus.
It comes at a time when the government is trying to push through the Ensuring Integrity Bill that aims to crack down on unions that break the law. To discuss this and more, we're talking now with Labor MP Amanda Rishworth and Liberal MP Jason Falinski. Thank you both for your time this morning. Amanda, I'll start with you. We've seen these tensions boil over with the CFMMEA this week. Is it time for the Labor Party to reassess its ties to the union movement?
Well, look, obviously the Labor Party has a strong connection with the union movement and in particular protecting workers' rights. Of course, there is bad behaviour in all walks of life, including in business and in unions alike. But in terms of protecting workers' rights, ensuring that workers get a good deal and decent pay, conditions, can go home safely at night, unions play a really important role. And the Labor Party has traditionally had a connection to make sure that we are also standing up for workers' rights. And this is in stark contrast to the coalition that cheers on any cuts to workers' rights, including the penalty rate cuts that are coming on the 1st of July.
But Amanda, that's somewhat different from the question specifically of John Setka's behaviour and of the concern, I suppose, in the wake of the election that the Labor Party might be tied in voters' minds too closely with a kind of old-fashioned sort of sexist bother boy attitude towards trade unions.
Well, of course, trade unions represent workers right across a range of industries, retail workers, early educators, all fighting for better pay and conditions. When it comes to specifically, as I said, bad behaviour, there should be no tolerance for that. And I think Anthony Albanese, our leader, has made that quite clear, that when it comes to the Labor Party and membership of the Labor Party, that he's seeking the Labor Party to move when it comes to this individual. But let's not denigrate a whole movement and a whole group of people that stick up for workers, that fight for things like penalty rates and decent wages, conditions, keeping workers safe, with the bad behaviour of a few. Otherwise, we would be denigrating every business for those few that do not pay their workers their superannuation or underpay their wages. You've got to be very clear about, calling out the bad behaviour, but not necessarily applying to everyone that works hard in that representing workers.
Jason, Amanda's saying there no tolerance for bad behaviour, but there is a place for unions in there advocating for workers.
That's absolutely right. Amanda's right to say that. It would be easy for me to kick John Setka while he's down, but the fact of the matter is that I think if you want to defend people's rights to say what they want to say, if what Mr Setka is reported to have said is correct, then I don't know why this is such a big deal. He has a right to hold unpopular opinions and to voice them. I think, though, that there are some limitations to that. One of the defamation of someone's character and reputation and incitement to violence. And in the past, Mr Setka has encourage people to take action, physical action, against people who are just doing their jobs and also against their families. Now, why Sally McManus and Bill Shorten at the time didn't think that was more serious, and that's not someone that they want associated with them, I don't know. Why they've chosen this particular issue to get upset about, I don't know. Amanda is right. People should voluntarily be allowed to join unions, and unions have a place in our work environment to negotiate people's awards. Equally, I think individuals should be able to do that too. It's all about freedom, and it's all about getting better outcomes for everyone involved in the working environment.
It's very big of you, Jason, not to kick John Setka while he's down, so congratulations on that. But isn't
it's an important issue.
I mean, rhetorically, I understand your point that he doesn't need you to jump on the pile.
No,
but let me just get to the substantive question.
It's your show.
Yeah, I want to get to the substantive question about the Ensuring Integrity Bill, which is the name of the bill that your government would like to pass, which would basically deregister unions that break the law and ban union officials for misconduct. Right? Why isn't this sort of thing something something that should be handled by the union itself and pressure can be applied to the union. But why codify into law a standard of behaviour that frankly doesn't apply to businesses and doesn't apply to parliamentarians like yourself?
Well, the answer to that question is pretty simple. It's not just about unions, it's about registered organisations, so it applies both to unions and employer organisations. It simply is trying to bring the same standards that apply under the corporations law to company directors and company office holders to people who are members of registered organisations. So it does apply the same standard. In fact, in some viewing, it's actually a lower standard or a lesser standard than what's contained in the corporations law. And I guess the third point is, it's a good question as to should we allow companies and registered organisations to self-govern in that way. The view is that markets and organisations are most efficient when there are integrity measures that the community has imposed on them, so that people don't need to worry about the bylaws of every particular company and registered organisation that they join. They know that there is a level of standard that the community has imposed on each organisation that they can rely on, and that saves obviously time and money when people are joining organisations.
Amanda, what's so wrong with that? That doesn't sound like an attack on unions.
Well, look, obviously we've got to see the details of what the government's putting forward. It did not pass the parliament last time because there were concerns that it did go much further than what is applied to companies in terms of the standards that it was applying, and that it did seem like a political attack, particularly on unions. As I said, there's bad behaviour. The amount of people that come to me that their companies have not paid them superannuation, for example, and there's very little recourse for them to go and get that super repaid. That has a big impact on their lives. Underpayment of wages, for example. So there is a significant a difference between what seems to be applied to companies as applied to unions in this bill. Obviously, we'll take a look at what the government is proposing, but if it's the same bill that was rejected by the parliament last time, then there are significant concerns that the whole parliament had when it came to specifically targeting unions.
We also wanted to cover another story that's in the Sydney Morning Herald this morning about a potential greater role for the Australian Signals Directorate. A government spokesman has said that the government's position hasn't changed on this, but is there room to boost the role of the ASD?
Oh, sure. I'm sure there is. You know, we obviously counter cyber terrorism is becoming the big thing that needs to occur at the moment. All of these things would need to be done. I mean, the Parliament needs to ensure that any actions undertaken by any government agency is done with within the control set of a court of law and undertaken by rule of law and separation of powers. So no state can just start imposing its will on the community and can also invade someone's privacy. So that they would need to be important junctures.
Well,
there.
according to this report, it could also sit within the networks of major Australian power, water, telecommunications and other critical infrastructure companies to help defend against foreign cyber attacks. Is that something that's being explored?
That is something that is under Malcolm Turnbull, that is something that we invested a lot of time and energy into. It's not something that the Parliament talks about because security matters are best not spoken about openly. But yes, cyber terrorism is now obviously the big issue that people are facing. The New York Times ran a story recently about the city of Baltimore has essentially come to a standstill because cyber hackers are basically ransomwaring that entire city. So this is a city with record gun crime. It's lost $18 million. People can't complete property transfers. They can't pay water bills. They can't pay electricity bills because they think that's out of Iran, but they're not sure.
But Jason, the response of the United States government will not be to throw away its Bill of Rights and start inserting, FBI snooping devices into Baltimore as a response. You know,
that's true.
There is a concern that what we're talking about here, just to clarify for people who don't follow the story terribly, the Australian Signals Directorate, that's Australia's big electric spying agency, and up until now it's only been able to look to spy abroad, never to turn its eyes on domestic citizens. And what your government wants is for it to be able to essentially turn its eyes on domestic citizens. The Liberal Party is supposed to be the party of liberty. Does that sound like liberty?
No, but you can't guarantee the liberty of people if you can't guarantee their safety. And under the Turnbull government, we set up a Centre for Cyber Security, which was to look at essential services like power, electricity, etc., banking, for example. I mean, imagine if the banking network went offline for 24 hours, what disruption that would do.
Well, you could put us all under 24-hour surveillance constantly and we could live in a totalitarian dictatorship and none of that would be a problem.
That's going from one extreme to the next, and that, of course, totalitarian states in the past have created problems of their own, which we would like to avoid too. But no, and that's the point, that all of these things must be done within the purview of ensuring the privacy of people and proper warrants, etc.
Amanda, what do you think of this? What does it sound like to you?
Well, look, I've only seen what's in the reports, and of course we know that cyber terrorism, cybercrime is an increasingly complex problem and does put us all at risk. At the same time, I think we need to obviously get the balance right between protecting our national security and indeed protecting the liberties of the Australian people. So there'd be a lot of questions, I imagine, about the powers and about oversight and about the offensive nature of this. Of course, what we're talking about is not fixing or addressing a crime after the fact or investigating a crime after a fact. It's actually an offensive power to stop something before it happens. So I think there is a lot of questions that would have to be worked through incredibly carefully, and it would need the confidence of the Australian people. I think we've seen in recent days around the AFP raids on journalists and the ABC a dwindling confidence of the Australian people about can they trust their government. And I think any issue like this needs to be worked through not only with the right oversights, but ensuring that you give confidence to the public that it would be used in a way that is in their interests and not necessarily to harm Australian citizens.
We finally just also wanted to touch on this morning, it's Men's Health Week this week, and according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, the leading cause of death in men between the ages of 15 and 44 is suicide, which is just really shocking. Amanda, how can we do better in this area?
Oh, look, we do need to work very hard at this issue. It is absolutely shocking, and I would have to say that one suicide death is one too many. I think there's a number of issues. I think men often are more reluctant to ask for help and not necessarily engage in help-seeking behaviour, and that's where we need to have approaches that are really responsive to men to ask for help. And one great example of that is Mates in Construction, which is a program that encourages colleagues and men that work alongside each other to look out for signs and ask, do you need some help? But we need to be making sure that suicide is destigmatised, that people feel that when they ask for help, they can get help. But importantly, support work colleagues and the broader community, look out for signs and symptoms and make sure that they're extending a hand, and then that the services are available. So we do need a very coordinated response that is tailored particularly to men who don't often actually seek help when they need it.
Jason, one of the things we've been talking about across Men's Health Week over this past week is the sort of crisis of masculinity, I suppose, that when you're raising young boys at the moment, we live in an era of Me Too and of a lot of awareness about how fantastic women's contribution to society is, and sometimes that can leave boys and young men in a slightly untethered place. What do we do about that?
Oh, thanks, Josh.
in 20 seconds or less, Jason.
Look, there are some really excellent programs. Got You for Life, Tomorrow's Man. You know, I agree with everything Amanda said. There's also an issue, I think, with young people, especially young men, who feel detached from what their identity is, and they don't. You know, it's not part of, or typically part of our identity to talk to each other about that. And Tomorrow's Man goes into schools and tries and gets people to get other boys to start talking to each other about what is acceptable and what makes things. Otherwise, it comes out sideways, as you know, and that's where the Me Too movement starts, and it's not what being a man is about. So, yeah.
Message. All right, we'll have to leave it there. Amanda Rishworth and Jason Falinski, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you need any information or support, if you're ever feeling down, you can always contact Beyond Blue on 1300 22 46 36, or if you or someone you know is experiencing distress, just do call Lifeline 13 11 14, 13 11 14 there.